Good evening and welcome to the ICAS Winter Symposium Epilogue 2020. I'm Shinja Kim, President and Chair of ICAS. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our program on the topics related to the Korean Peninsula with our very special guest speaker, the Honorable Taeyong, a member of the 21st National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. It's so good to see you again, Minister Cho. Well, you were minister when we, ICS delegate, paid a visit with you at your foreign ministry office on a hot day of early July in 2015. And now it's taken 5 years for us to catch up, and we are delighted to welcome you here today with our colleagues in the States. The Honorable Taeyong is now a member of the 21st National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. He is well known, of course, for his deep experience in diplomacy drawn from his over 3 decades of service in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a career diplomat. Representative Cho served in 3 major areas: Director General of both the Korea Nuclear Affairs Bureau, North American Affairs Bureau, and the Deputy Minister for Protocol Affairs and the Ambassador to Ireland and Australia, respectively. In addition, he served as a special representative of Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs. He was then promoted to First Vice Minister when he was engaged in the North Korea nuclear issues in international relations with a broad diplomatic portfolio. In 2015, Taeyong became the first Deputy Director of National Security of the Office of the President. Currently, he is Deputy Chair of the Policy Steering Committee, Chair of the International Committee, and Advisor of North Korea Human Rights Committee of the People Power Party. Of note here is that Representative Cho had a robust working relationship with Anthony Blinken, the then U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, holding 5 rounds of USSK strategic consultation on North Korea between 2015 and 2017. During the 2 prior years, as South Korea's first foreign minister, he represented South Korea in regular U.S., South Korea, and Japan trilateral talks, again with Anthony Blinken, and Japanese Vice Foreign Minister Shisuke Sugiyama. Assemblyman Cho studied political science at Seoul National University and Foreign Service Program of the Oxford University in 1983. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my special pleasure and honor that we have National Assemblyman Taeyong here with us today to discuss the ongoing critical security issues in the Korean Peninsula and the region, and also South Korea's active role in promoting democracy in the Indo-Pacific region towards the goal of achieving humanity, peace, and security in partnership with our allies of the free world. So now let me close my opening remark with our special thanks to many of our esteemed colleagues and ICS fellows participating in these discussions, sharing their insights and perspectives. So with that, hope you enjoy the program. Thank you.
Take the floor now. Well, it's a great honor and pleasure to be part of this ICAS Winter Symposium. Can you hear me, everybody? All right. So I'm Taeyong Cho. I've been in the Korean government for almost 40 years. But last year I became a member of the National Assembly. So I had to go through some transitions from the preparing and answering questions to the posing questions. So from answering to questioning. So that's the transition I had to go through last year. It was it took a little time, but I think I'm got a little hang of it. But answering questions and having discussions have always been my lifelong undertaking. So this format is very, very comfortable. And also, I'm very glad to have this chance to talk with many of my friends and very esteemed colleagues and fellows of the ICAS. To kick off discussions, I'd like to share my general views about what happened during the last 4 years and what kind of challenges we'll have to deal with as we progress. Now, the last 4 years, the situation on the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia have been, generally speaking, I think, deteriorating from the standpoint of ROK, from the stand of Japan and the United States. Why? Because starting with North Korean nuclear threat actually has increased in spite of the 3 summit meetings between President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un. North Korea has done couple of actions, but all these actions were, I think, reversible, and also all these actions took place before the Singapore summit in 2018. So now only the moratoriums on the nuclear tests and the ICBM test are in place. In the meantime, Kim Jong-un demonstrated his resolve to keep the nuclear weapons and going into developing tactical nuclear weapons, more potent and more accurate missile capability. And also, he talked about some kind of nuclear weapons doctrine in the latest Party Congress. In the meantime, actually, North Korean economic situation is in big trouble. The sanctions since 2016 finally have become effective and really affected North Korea's capability to earn foreign currency. Yes, North Korea tried to subvert the sanctions regime, and a great deal of smuggling activities are still going on. That's a problem. But at the same time, the fundamentals of North Korean economy, and especially Kim Jong-un's capability to earn foreign currency, have been heavily affected by the sanctions. So these two factors, increasing nuclear threat and missile threat from North Korea, and the mounting economic problems facing Kim Jong-un will probably in play as Biden administration try to come up with a new strategy for North Korean nuclear issue. For the last 4 years, another thing that's very negative happened in this region, that is the ROK-Japan relations. As you all know, relations between Korea and Japan have always been difficult, have always been challenging, but the relations now, I think, are actually all-time low. And what is concerning to me, especially, is that the basis for a trilateral security cooperation involving US, Japan, and ROK have all but disappeared, and this is a problem. Thinking about China, seeing this, the weakening security cooperation among Korea, Japan, and United States, have been emboldened and have become very assertive and aggressive in the areas around the Korean Peninsula. So for the first time, China and Russia staged Air Force combined exercises in 2019. That was a hugely concerning event. And the two countries, Russia and China, actually staged another Air Force combined exercises December last year. So that pose a question of the definition, geographical definition of the first island chain as claimed by China. More specifically, so Korean Peninsula is within the first island chain claimed by China, or at the border or at the outside of this chain. I think the increasingly assertive Chinese actions made it very clear that they had intention to put the Korean Peninsula as a whole under their strategic influence. So that is, I think, probably a long-term, mid to long-term challenge, perhaps more important challenge than the immediate North Korean nuclear challenge. And the United States under Trump administration for the last 4 years did achieve some, the positive developments, positive achievements. But at the same time, when it comes to the alliance management, the Trump's America was not very good at promoting and safeguarding the alliance. So alliance has been weakened for the last 4 years, creating some kind of space for China, Russia, and other countries to test the alliance resolve in the areas around the Korean Peninsula. A case in point involves the episode around GSOMIA, that's intelligence sharing agreement between Korea and Japan. And Moon Jae-in government announced that they are going to terminate the GSOMIA agreement with Japan. The purpose of that, of course, was to push the United States to come in and help the Moon Jae-in government in its bickering with Japan. And that was a miscalculation. So the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and National Security Advisor of the Trump administration all came out and strongly criticized the Moon Jae-in government and supported the continuation of the GSOMIA agreement. But my point is that President Trump was nowhere to be seen in that episode. So that only demonstrates to me that President Trump doesn't really value highly the alliance or networking of the alliance and strategic posture in this region. I think that's regrettable. So coming with Biden administration, I believe that the importance of the alliance will be back on in Washington, D.C., which is a good news for the American allies like Republic of Korea and Japan. And that's very, very important. So America, I think, is back in Northeast Asia. Perhaps the pivot to Northeast Asia, a la the pivot to Asia several years ago. So pivot to Northeast Asia probably is on, and which is a good news for the Republic of Korea. Does that mean that the alliance between the ROK and the US will be good, back on, and on smooth sailing? That depends, I think. It depends upon how the Moon Jae-in government is going to approach the common challenges facing the alliance, and also depends upon how President Biden and his team is going to make efforts to revive the alliance in spirit and in substance. I believe that during the last 4 years, the fundamentals of the alliance have been weakened, beginning with a common threat perception. I believe that there is a certain gap between the threat perception of the Moon Jae-in-led ROK government and Biden administration. So something fundamental to be dealt with. And then there is a question of how we're going to approach the North Korea's denuclearization. So the right way forward to me is that we'll have to never recognize North Korea as a legitimate nuclear power, regardless of the nuclear and missile capabilities in the hands of Kim Jong-un. And secondly, we'll have to reinforce and we'll have to resuscitate the implementation of the economic sanctions, because in the last couple of years, the sanctions are good, regimes is still intact and solid, but implementation is woefully lacking. So we have a job in hand to resuscitate the implementation of the sanctions regime. And also, we really have to, the two countries will really have to map out the strategy for denuclearization negotiations. Here, I have to share with you that the success of the negotiations will be extremely difficult. But that doesn't mean that ROK and the US will give up, will have to give up on negotiations. But they'll have to approach these negotiations with very sound and strategic, a common the perspectives, something that didn't happen for the last 4 years. And then, of course, we'll have to make sure that the ROK, Japan, US security cooperation will be restored. There were not only GSOMIA, but there were some other exercises, like missile warning exercises, the SAREX exercises. As far as I know, during the Moon Jae-in government, just one SAREX search and rescue exercises among Korea, Japan, and US took place. That is not positive. That's something that has to be done in that respect. And for that to happen, of course, the general relations between Korea and Japan will have to be improved. And I think it will take probably Herculean efforts for both governments to make that happen. And I have a sense that Biden administration, unlike Trump administration, will probably come in and strongly encourage both Korea and Japan to improve our bilateral relations. And then China, a huge challenge. And the first thing I hope will happen between the Biden administration and ROK government is that the open, transparent and straightforward and strategic discussions about our strategic goals against vis-a-vis China, the strategy that we'll pursue together, and priorities we'll have to have together. So for example, among the array of economic issues between US and China, so what kind of issues will take priority on the Biden administration? I have a feeling that technology issue will probably be the first priority, because say September last year, I saw my good friend, Secretary of State Tony Blinken, had a rather long and substantive interview with CBS. He talked about the need to approach this issue as a priority issue, and he used the term that the competition between techno-democracies and techno-autocracies. So I have a feeling that this issue will be very, very important, and I hope that Moon Jae-in government will be ready for this issue. So there are so many challenges facing ROK government and the Biden administration, but I'm generally optimistic about things direction. What I mean is that I believe that probably the relations will improve, the alliance will be strengthened, and we probably be able to have more common strategic perspectives after 1 or 2 years. And because the President Biden is so well versed in foreign relations, alliance matters, and Biden team is full of very, very capable and experienced people, beginning with Secretary of State Tony Blinken, Ambassador Wendy Sherman, and Avril Haines, Director of the National Intelligence, and Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, and also DoD, to be led by Lloyd Austin, new Secretary of Defense. So I hope that with the advent of Biden administration, the Korea and United States will begin really a substantive and strategic discussion so that the two countries will close the gap in the sense of threat perception, the perception of the common challenges, and ways to go from here. So I will stop here. I will be very glad to flesh out my viewpoints while answering your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Taeyong. That's a great opening salvo, so to speak. Okay, Bruce Bechtel, hi there, Bruce? Bruce, unmute your button, please. Bruce, unmute your button. Okay, all right.
Your
Bruce, go
modern
ahead.
boxes with the many flashing colors confuse me, but I have a question.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay. Hold on. I've got it written down here. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir, and we all appreciate you being here. My question is about the present and the future. Do you believe current North Korean sanctions are sufficient? And if not, can you please recommend what further targeted sanctions could be implemented by the UN and/or allied nations?
Thank you, Bruce. Go ahead, Taeyong, it's all yours.
Okay. Sangju, very
Okay.
very glad to see you again.
Thank you, wonderful.
And Bruce, thank you for the very good, very important question. I think the sanctions regime now is much more robust than the sanctions pre-2015. So the first task for two countries to make sure that these sanctions be implemented strictly, because the implementation, as I said, has been weakened for the last couple of years. So we'll have to revive the sanctions implementation. That doesn't mean that there is not much else that we can do. I believe that we really have to tackle two issues. One, I think, is crude oil. So North Korea is full of natural resources, including the uranium, the mineral ore. But the only item that they don't have is crude oil. So if we squeeze on crude oil, that will really impact upon the Kim Jong-un regime. The second thing is a secondary sanctions by the United States. To make sure the sanctions be implemented to the fullest, the U.S. will have to take the lead to encourage countries to stay in line, keep in line, and implement the sanctions. And secondary boycott has been the most potent, the tool in the U.S. toolkit. But I have had a feeling in the past that actually U.S. Was a little shy in applying the secondary boycotts for obvious reasons. But I think it's a matter of priority. If Biden administration really wanted to draw out Kim Jong-un regime to a genuine denuclearization negotiations, sanctions really have to bite. And for that to happen, US will have to make sure that China especially will have to stay in line in terms of sanctions. And China, of course, is very conscious and concerned about the possibility of US second sanctions on Chinese, especially financial institutions, and something that Biden administration will have to think very deeply about.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank
Follow
you
up?
so much.
Yeah. Bruce, you have follow-up question? If not, Bruce Bennett, are you there?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think
Okay.
the Assemblyman and I are of almost one mind. Great minds think alike. I think that was a great answer, sir. And I hope we go down that road very soon.
Thank you,
Thank you
Bruce.
very much, Bruce.
Bruce Bennett? If not, Tong Kim, please. Come in, Tong. Tong Kim. Okay, go ahead.
안녕하세요. 저 옛날에 미국에 계실 때 국무부에서 통역하는 통킴입니다. 반갑습니다.
잘 알고 있습니다. 안녕하십니까?
Long time no see. I just said exchange a personal greeting to him. My question is very simple. What approaches or policy do you and your party want to come up with to pursue in view of your understanding of what the North Koreans are up to and your anticipation of coordination or perhaps more of differences between Moon Jae-in government and the Biden administration, as we've been seeing some nuances and differences popping up here and there. What thrust of direction would you want to see happen in terms of the style, that is approach, and policy substance? Thank you.
Thank you, Tong.
Well, that's a very fundamentally important question. There is a fundamental difference in the approaches by Moon Jae-in government and in the approaches myself and my political party take about these issues. Let me introduce a couple of exchanges I had with new Foreign Minister Taeyong for his confirmation hearings Friday last week. And Taeyong started out by saying that Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader, has a will to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. And he went on to say that Singapore summit was a success, and Biden administration will do well to begin North Korea approaches from the Singapore summit outcome. Thirdly, Taeyong said that he is very sorry that agreement was not reached in Hanoi, and blame should be placed on both North Korea and United States. But he strongly feels that then National Security Advisor John Bolton is to blame for not entertaining the North Korea's reasonable proposal to dismantle Yongbyon nuclear facility in exchange for the sanctions that has been adopted after 2017. On all 3 points, I have a vehemently different viewpoints. And I believe strongly that Taeyong's assumptions, Taeyong's policy directions, Taeyong's the appraisal of Singapore summit outcome, and all wrong, dead wrong. I believe that we'll have to maintain a healthy skepticism is quite an understatement on my part, actually, but I'll begin with understatement. So we'll have to really keep very healthy skepticism about Kim Jong-un's intentions. And given his given his verbal the statements and his actions, we'll have to only conclude that Kim Jong-un's North Korea is really intent on keeping nuclear weapons. Concluding otherwise, we really have to wait for a conclusive and specific evidence that tells us something else. And also, the Singapore joint statement was a very broad political statement that didn't say anything specific about denuclearization. In Singapore, you might recall that US and North Korea agreed to begin a working level denuclearization negotiations. And on that spot, President Trump actually nominated Pompeo as new US chief negotiator, and Kim Jong-un avoided naming anyone from his side. And look, what happened after that was that there was no substantive nuclear negotiations between US and North Korea, in spite of the 3 summit meetings between Kim Jong-un and Trump. So the Singapore, I don't believe that Biden administration will have to disavow Singapore joint statement. They can disavow, they don't disavow, it doesn't really matter. What is important is to make sure that the US and North Korea will sit on the negotiating table and talk about a substantive nuclear questions like we did in the past. And also, what happened in Hanoi, actually, I wrote a column about it in English and 38 North. I said that that's a blessing in disguise because the sanctions regime, sanctions resolutions that were adopted following the 2017 were most important sanctions. So once they are gone, and North Korea will be under a much less pressure to get along in negotiations. And also at the same time, the Yongbyon nuclear facility has been sold twice already. Yongbyon nuclear facility, I do not believe, is a center of the North Korea's nuclear programs today. There are much more important and serious facilities out there. So trying to negotiate Yongbyon nuclear facility, especially when they did not have the agreed destination, final destination of negotiation, is a huge mistake. And I'm very glad that President Trump got out of that trap and did not make that huge mistake. So fundamentally, I have very strongly different perspectives with Foreign Minister Taeyong and Moon Jae-in government. And my viewpoints probably will be the main parts of the PPP, my party's policies. So there are big differences, fundamental differences.
Thank you, Taeyong. Tong, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. Do you then share the view, very prevailing view that is, that North Korea would never give up its nuclear weapons? If you do, what will be the goal of diplomacy or negotiation to achieve? At what level?
Thank you, Tong.
Well, many experts believe that North Korea and Kim Jong-un will never give up nuclear weapons. This is an assumption we'll have to test. And diplomacy should be tried, I think. But I have been arguing for the last 2 or 3 years that given what had been already happening on the Korean Peninsula and North Korea's nuclear arsenal, prudent strategic planners will have to prepare for a both success and especially failure of the negotiations. So we'll have to prepare for the success and failure of the negotiations. We'll have to prepare for a strong and genuine negotiation. But at the same time, perhaps more importantly, ROK government will have to prepare for the ways and means and the policies to deal with North Korea's nuclear threat. So there were three-pronged the policies pursued by previous Korean governments vis-a-vis North Korea's nuclear threat. Some of that has been succeeded by Moon Jae-in government, but I have feelings that actually the intensity of policy implementation has been lessened somewhat. And also, the extended deterrence provided by the United States will have to be reviewed. What I mean is that these commitments that's been expressed in the statements like the SCM Security Consultative Meeting joint statement has been sufficient to make sure that North Korea would not threaten ROK. But now Kim Jong-un has the capability to pose nuclear threat on ROK. So I believe that two governments, ROK and US, will have to think about how we are going to make this extended deterrence commitment more effective, and especially make sure that Kim Jong-un understands clearly that if Kim Jong-un used nuclear weapons against ROK, and it will be met by overwhelming nuclear response by the United States. So many things we'll have to do. So we have to prepare for the success and failure of the negotiation. And in the meantime, the ROK government will have to strengthen our own capability to deal with the threat. And ROK and US will have to find a way to make the extended deterrence more effective and make these facts known to Kim Jong-un. And for the negotiations, we'll have to go back to fundamentals. I mean, we really have to go back to fundamentals and basics. That is, we'll have to really force Kim Jong-un to say that he is going to dismantle nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons programs. Yes, he's going to talk about all kinds of outrageous conditions and demands in the process. But what is most important is that he'll have to say that these negotiations are aimed at dismantling North Korea's nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons programs. Just saying denuclearization of Korean Peninsula doesn't suffice, because when you read North Korea's official document, for example, 2006 North Korean government spokesman's memorandum about their definition about denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, you'll be surprised to see that you'll have to withdraw, for example, all USFK before they can negotiate on nuclear negotiations. So you really have to go back to basics and make sure that we are talking about the same final destination of negotiations. And then if that is established, we'll have to have a very robust denuclearization roadmap, and that will have the rather reliable verification elements in that. So this is a very tall order. This is a very challenging task, but I can assure you that with the experience already available in the Biden team, if Kim Jong-un is willing to make a strategic decision to forego its nuclear weapons, I'm sure that ROK negotiators and US negotiators will come up with a very reasonable the roadmap for negotiations that will give North Korea tangible benefits in the process, and something that's doable. But before that happens, Kim Jong-un will have to say that he can give up nuclear weapons. That didn't happen so far.
Thank you. Now, Bruce Bennett, you are back. Unmute your button and raise a question.
Can you hear me now?
Sure. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. We know that Kim Jong-un wants the U.S. and the ROK to make various compromises Ostensibly, this is to demonstrate a lack of US and ROC hostility, but I worry, is it really more about breaking the ROC and US alliance to allow the North to establish dominance on the peninsula?
Thank you, Bruce.
Well, okay, let's talk about North Korea's strategic aims by having nuclear weapons. Bruce, by the way, so glad to see you, Bruce. See you again.
Good to see you again, too. Thank you.
All right. Say you remember this, right? Say 1994 and 2005. There are people, a number of people, both in U.S. and my country, who say that all Kim Jong-il, North Korean leader, wants is a regime survival, right? So nuclear weapons is a means to the ends. So that's negotiable. So what's necessary? They argued then that to find a way to make Kim Jong-il safe in preserving his regime, right?
Right.
But what happened after that? 6 nuclear tests, all sorts of missile capabilities, nuclear doctrines, SLBM, and tactical nuclear weapons, all that. Clearly tell us and tell me that it will be a huge mistake to think North Korea's strategic intentions are purely defensive. I think it's ridiculous now. Or, I'll give it to some of these people. So even if North Korea's nuclear strategic intentions were defensive in the beginning, but their strategic intentions now, judging from what Kim Jong-un said during the Party Congress, is much more proactive, aggressive, and offensive. As you know, that they revised their party covenant and put in some words that can mean that they actually are going to their plan. They intend to unify the whole peninsula by force, right? So I think it's always prudent to expect the worst from your adversary. So for now, I assume that Kim Jong-un's intentions is not just preserving his regime, but try to find a way to sever the alliance between US and ROK, and then find an opportunity to, if not communise, but dominate the whole peninsula under his own terms. That's what I think now. What was the second question? I'm sorry, I forgot in the process.
That was the first question. That was it.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have a follow-up question,
You
Bruce?
have another question, right, Bruce?
I do.
Go ahead, Bruce.
So let me ask about the original defense reform plan from 2005. We knew at that point that over a series of years, the ROC Army was going to get very much smaller, partially because of demographics and partially because of a political decision to reduce the conscription period. Now we see that the Army will probably wind up by 2026 or 2027 being roughly half the size of what it was in 2005 when the first plan was put together. Does that worry you?
Thank you,
I
Bruce.
just remembered your first question, so I'll answer that. You said that Kim Jong-un's strategic aims is to destroy the alliance, is it not? That was your question, right?
Sure.
Okay. Yes, I'm sure. I mean, if I were in the shoes of Kim Jong-un, I'll think about the same thing, right? I really cannot blame Kim Jong-un for that. I mean, if it is translated literally into Korean, I'll be hammered by the conservatives in my country. But what I'm saying is this: yes, finding a way to weaken and destroy the alliance has always been North Korea's strategic aim from the 1950s. Never changed. So I was very concerned for the last 4 years because it looks like that the actions by President Trump and Trump administration actually were in line with the strategic aims of North Korea. So it almost, kind of the situation of two to tango. So I was very concerned about it. And with the advent of the Biden administration, my concern is almost not there. So I'm very happy about it. And your question about the Korean military force, this is a very challenging question. I would have answered to this question much more easily, more comfortably, if I was still working in the government, not in the National Assembly. So I came to know a little bit more about the people, the need for a politicians to respond to the people's feelings and senses and demands now. So your question became more difficult now to me as a politician. Okay, this is very, very worrisome. For the last decade or so, while the military draft system was in place, but duration of military service has been shortened again and again. Given that the the weaponry became more sophisticated and required more training to be mastered, this trend is very, very concerning. And I'm sure that these concerns are widely shared by our professional officer corps of the ROK military. And on top of that, our number, our human resources for the military service will be dwindled much more quickly than had been anticipated like 10 years ago. So actually, I think it's time for ROK military to begin to think outside the box and really think hard about what to do, because the trend, I think, is still trend is already there, will not be reversible. One way to go, I believe, is to make sure that ROK, make sure that we find ways to utilize ROK's superiority in technological areas into a increased military capabilities. So ROK's version of like offset strategy, so to speak. So we really need to think about developing and deploying what's the word, these drones and the whole kinds of artilleries and weapons, and even the tanks and the ships with no soldiers in it, right? So we really need to think about these aspects, because as you know, the Tesla's share prices are really soaring much more quickly than I had anticipated. So once that is done, as you know, these technologies can be applied to military areas, and ROK has a technological edge, something that Kim Jong-un doesn't have on this. So what I'm saying is that the military, stop. I'm not blaming military for being bureaucratic, but I'll just urge the military to stop being bureaucrats and becoming soldiers and strategic thinkers and planners, and really think about the ways to maintain and increase our military capability as against North Korea in a sustainable way. That's my point.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I can't hear you, Sangju.
David Maxwell, please. David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
If not,
Yes, I
okay,
am.
go ahead, David.
Yeah, good evening and good morning. And thank you, Assemblyman Cho. You've really offered us some great remarks. And I want to really continue. I mean, you've covered a lot of what I wanted to address. So I'm going to ask my question in a little bit different way. First of all, given your extensive background as a career government official, I want to first ask you how you assess the MOFA and State Department strategy working group that was established in 2018. And do you support the continuation of that working group? But my real substantive question is that, and you've talked about this, the real problem I think we face in the alliance is the strategic assumptions that the Moon administration and the Biden administration have about the nature and the objectives of the Kim family regime. I think that's really the fundamental problem in the alliance. And we might work through SMA and OPCON transition and many other issues may be resolved. But this fundamental difference in the objectives and the nature of the Kim family regime is really going to be a problem. And so in strategy, it is all about the assumptions about the nature and objectives really has to be resolved, or at least there needs to be sufficient alignment between of those assumptions between South Korea and the United States. And so my question is, can the strategy working group between MOFA and State work to resolve that and bring the Moon administration and the Biden administration closer together on these strategic assumptions in order to gain sufficient alignment? And thank you for your great remarks tonight.
Thank you, Dave.
So, first of all, as I said, I think for the last 4 years, the fundamentals, the upholding the alliance has been weakened in a very worrisome way. And it involves, as you said, David, the strategic assumptions, threat perceptions, and the fundamental ways forward. And all three categories, I think there is a certain important gap between Moon Jae-in government and US government, US administration. So this is very, very worrisome. The gap has to be closed. Is it possible? Yes, everything's possible, but at the same time, I think we need something much more fundamental, much more high level than the foreign ministry, State Department working level framework, because working level framework is great in terms of mapping out a common strategics and tactics usually, but it has always been rather difficult to really talk about the fundamental strategic assumptions in this format. So we need probably something else. We need a way to have a real meeting of minds between Seoul and Washington. I've been working in the government all my life. So I worked in Nomuhyun governments. I was involved in some of these consultations. I know what happened. So again, as I said, it's a great format to talk about mapping out common tactics and strategies, right? But it's not a good format to talk about a fundamental strategic assumptions. So we need something much more than that. So what is concerning to me is that actually, much of that was actually anticipated. As you know, the people working in the Moon Jae-in government, some of them I know, and I know how they think. So, this I assume and I expect, I had anticipated a certain disconnect between Moon Jae-in government and the U.S. Trump administration, and also the Biden administration. That's given actually. But I didn't expect, and I was very, very concerned about the erosion of trust between the two governments. How I put it, professional, the bureaucrats, professional people, especially. I don't know if there is a certain trust that has to be there between the two militaries, for example. given the fact that last year's security consultative meeting, there was no press conference by two defense secretaries in Washington, D.C. for the first time in a very, very long time. And given the very unusual joint statement out of SCM, I said, wow, what is this? I was very struck by this joint statement last year. I mean, joint statement was there to actually accentuate the differences rather than the promoting the commonalities. I mean, I haven't seen that kind of statement, especially coming out of two militaries. During the Nomu현 government, the trust level between the two militaries were very high, as I see it, as I recall. But now I think, I'm not sure whether that trust is there. So something that has to be restored very, very quickly. I hope that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and his team will really think about approaching the ROK issue, not just burden sharing. I'm not concerned about burden sharing anymore. It should never have been the presidential issue in the first place. So negotiators will be trusted in finding a reasonable compromise. They will, left alone, if they are left alone. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the restoring the trust and thinking about the strategic assumptions and the basic goals among the two militaries. As you recall that when President Trump was elected 4 years ago, at that time Korea was in the deepest political troubles, and we had acting president rather than president. And the first person of the Trump administration who visited Korea at that time, 2016, was actually Secretary Jim Mattis. He came to Korea. He met our people. He gave us reassurances to the alliance. So situation is different now, but still equally challenging to me. So I hope that this high-level meeting between the two militaries will take place sooner rather than later, along with the meeting between the two secretaries of state.
Thank you, Taeyong.
As a follow-up, then,
Okay.
Your comment about trust in the military, I think, is very important. So I'd like to ask you, has the shift of U.S. forces from Yongsan to Camp Humphreys and the decision to put the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command at Camp Humphreys, but it's actually operating in multiple locations, do you think that has helped or contributed to undermining trust in the relationship between the two militaries? Since we have MND and JCS in Seoul, some of CFC in Seoul, and then the bulk of U.S. forces and the senior leadership in Camp Humphreys. Is that contributing to the decline in trust as you have seen?
No, I don't think so. But that's one of the issues that has surfaced, right? So taking this opportunity, I believe that there are a couple of important issues in the alliance management area, of course. And one of the most important issues, of course, is the OPCON transfer. Everybody knows that Moon Jae-in government wants that to happen within President Moon Jae-in's term. But the agreement between the two governments is very different. It's a conditions-based approach. And I strongly emphasize that this agreement will have to be strictly implemented and observed by the two governments. You see, the transition of OPCON transfer is a delicate issue, and unless this takes place in the atmosphere of greatest confidence and trust between the two governments and between the two militaries, it will be a huge mistake. It might be a beginning of the unraveling of the alliance. I'm very concerned about that. So this is a very important issue. SMA is okay, but combined exercise is another very important issue. I know that the motto of the USFK is fight tonight. For that to happen, the readiness level will have to maintain. That I know for a fact that General Abrams was very, very frustrated in not being able to have these exercises and being able to maintain the readiness. And this issue is probably very, very pressing, immediate challenge for the two militaries. Now, all these issues are important issues, but what is most important is restoring the confidence and trust between the two militaries. Because I was, foreign service officer, but I was very close to these security issues, alliance issues, for a diplomat. And I have always had a feeling that the two militaries actually talked in much more detailed way. I mean, talked much more than the conversation I know about, right? So they were talking constantly and very, very closely, and something I'm not privy to. Frustrating from time to time, but at the same time, I was very reassured that the two militaries are really in lockstep, right? I have a feeling these days that these trust have been somewhat weakened, and something, I mean, this is something they will have to, Biden administration will have to address very, very quickly, I hope. Okay.
Thank you, Taeyong. Okay, Larry Nix. Larry, are you there? Come in, please. Larry Nix? Larry? Okay, if not, Tara? Tara O?
Yes, I'm
Yes, go ahead.
unmuting myself here.
Okay, go
Hey,
ahead.
good evening. So I have a question that's related to South Korea, so a more domestic issue. And since you're, new representative to the People Power Party, which is the largest opposition party in Korea, so I just want to share with you some observation and then a question. So we know that the ruling party has passed a series of laws, including the anti-leaflet law in South Korea. That was just rammed through. But that was not the only one. There was a long list of laws that were just rammed through the National Assembly without really considering any of the opposition parties, or at least the main opposition party's input. And so to me, that is a behavior of a one-party state, which should not be the situation in South Korea, but that's what we see. So, and these laws are very, they suppress, or they are against anti-freedom of speech, anti-human rights, and a long list of others. Another law that they passed is taking away South Korea's capability to catch North Korean spies they call this NIS reform, National Intelligence Service reform. But that's essentially what that was about. And so I guess one question is, I know the ruling party has, right after the election, they had 3/5 majority, and that number slightly changed, but essentially they can pass any laws that they want, except for the ones that require 2/3 majority, which is like the Constitution. But so in that case, what can the main opposition party do when they have this great number? They have enough numbers to pass any laws that they want. So that's number one. Or can the opposition party do anything? So that's one question. And subset of that, since you're on the National Assembly's Intelligence Committee, I was wondering if you can elaborate on the implication of the NIS reform bill that was passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
Tara, good to see you. And I think I missed you February last year, actually. I was at the CPEC meeting, and yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's very frustrating situation that I have to deal with as member of the opposition party, as you rightly pointed out. I was both at the Foreign Affairs Committee, where they passed the Anti-Leaflet Act. I was in, as you said, the Intelligence Committee when the committee where they passed the NIS bill. And because of these two bills and some together with some of the other issues, actually, the opposition party went for the filibuster. And I did a speech from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. And yes, I know, at the end of the day, we could not block the passage of the laws, and which made my frustration greater, as a matter of fact. Our National Assembly rules of procedure is very similar to the US Senate now, with the passage of the procedural laws a couple of years ago. So when they have, as you said, the 3/5 majority, they can always propose a cloture motion for the next discussions and put anything to vote, and they can, of course, pass any laws. So what they cannot do, only thing they cannot do is to the constitutional revision. Otherwise, they can do pretty much everything else. So my party is doing the two things. One is doing everything we can within the National Assembly. That is making arguments, sometimes making alternative proposals, and trying to make these viewpoints known to the people and appeal to the people. And then the second thing is that we go out to the streets, go out to the place very close to Blue House, and doing the one-man picket relay demonstration. Why one man? Because of the coronavirus, the corona epidemic measures. We cannot get together more than 4 people. So that's why we have to do it 1 or 2. So most seriously, I think we really have to find a way to get our points across to the people, and let people know what's happening in the National Assembly. Let people know what's wrong, and what's wrong with some of the actions being done by the government party. Have our efforts been sufficient? Definitely not, and woefully lacking. We have to do more. We have to do more. We have to find a way and do this. And that, as you know, we have upcoming elections for the mayor of Metropolitan City of Seoul and Metropolitan City of Busan. And it will be probably closer race than some analysts think. Especially Seoul mayor election will be very challenging to my party. But these elections are important elections, and these elections were never meant to be taking place. Only with the sexual harassment scandals by the then current mayor of the Democratic Party of Seoul and Busan, these important elections took place. And so my party will have to make best efforts to use these both to win the elections. We have to win the elections, but at the same time, use the elections as a platform to make our viewpoints and our arguments known to wider Korean public, something that we are doing, but we'll have to do more. About the NIS reform bill, I vehemently opposed, all of us from the People Power Party, vehemently opposed to the reform bill. There are many flaws in the bill, and flaws in terms of a good legislation in the first place. I mean, technically, the bill is very, very flawed, but fundamentally, what is most important is that they are going to take away from the NIS, National Intelligence Service, the responsibility to catch North Korean spies. Okay, and then there is no other the government agencies to take up that responsibilities. They intend to pass these responsibilities to the national police, but at the moment, still there is no law having passed the National Assemblies. There is no agency, and they are going to, which is supposed to take up the responsibilities. So there will be a vacuum, right, for this capability, which is which shouldn't happen, should not have happened. And there are many arguments against the transferring these responsibilities from the NIS to the police. I should not take up too much of your time, but fundamentally, they decided to take away the responsibilities without designating the agency to take up the same responsibilities. So what's going to happen? I know because I worked in the government. These responsibilities are not very popular with Moon Jae-in's Blue House. All of us know that. So what do you think will happen? Police will not be aggressive in taking up these responsibilities and making preparations for the transition of the responsibilities. So in the process, our capability to catch North Korean spies and all spies for the matter will be severely weakened, and will be weakened permanently after that. So this is such a bad law, and we argued against it, but in the final analysis, we weren't able to stop it. So that was one of the most frustrating moments in my short political career that happened December last year. Let's talk about human rights a little bit. I didn't have a chance to talk about human rights. Yeah. Human rights is probably one area in which Biden administration and the Moon Jae-in government differ in their assessments and in their approaches. To be frank, Trump administration didn't talk very much about North Korean human rights. And the Trump administration, they did not actually appoint North Korean human rights ambassador within the State Department. And no human rights ambassador was appointed by the Moon Jae-in government, something they are supposed to do under North Korea human rights law that passed the National Assembly 3 years ago. I hope that the human rights issue will become more important for a Moon Jae-in government and in the relations between US and ROK, North Korea policy coordination, because North Korean human rights in itself is an important issue. And secondly, ROK has been making progress and has been becoming more mature, more complete democracy in the last decades and years. But that momentum has been weakened now. And I'm very concerned about that, especially recently Anti-Leaflet Act, which is about freedom of expression, passed the National Assembly. I was so frustrated and angry because there is a way to manage the safety of the local people when balloons are being flown by the activists. There are ways. We don't have to have this law that fundamentally restricts the exercise of freedom of expression, but that happened. That happened. And Trump administration didn't take really an issue, except that Steve Biegun, in his last visit, as I know, actually talked about this issue with Moon Jae-in government, but probably this is outgoing administration, so didn't have sufficiently substantive impact upon the actions of Moon Jae-in government. I hope that this issue will be actively discussed between the Seoul and Washington, because this is the right thing to do. And I hope that US will rejoin as co-sponsors of the North Korean human rights resolution in the United Nations. And I hope that my government also will rejoin as co-sponsor of the human rights resolution as well. So an Anti-Leaflet Act demonstrates a definite retreat of Korea's democracy. And I hope that this issue will be approached and discussed actively from a fundamental viewpoint, from the substantive viewpoints, and not from the political viewpoints. I don't want to politicize this issue at all. I hope that human rights issues will be approached as human rights issues, which is very, very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Taeyong. Is Larry Nix out there? Larry? If not, Inhwan O? Inhwan O? Inhwan, if not, Richard
Yeah.
White?
I'm
Inhwan?
here.
Oh,
I'm
Inhwan,
here.
go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my question. And it's been about close to 50 years since I left Korea. It's been a while. However, I visited Korea now and then. And my concern is on civil defense. I get about 3 information, and from there, I'd like to show my concern. One is a thing called candlelight revolution or demonstration on Seoul Street 5-6 years ago, before Moon regime took over this government. At that time, during the candlelight revolution, there were about 63,000 Chinese students studying in Korea participated. It's a well-known secret. You can search on YouTube, it's known. And then they have to attend there, because once they finish their school and go back home, they cannot get a job once they're on a red flag, not attending such a thing that mobilized by the government. That's one information. The second one was that even a little further longer than that, there was a street fight in the middle of downtown Seoul between Korean people and the Chinese people. And the fight was so fierce, and then after a while they ran away, escaped from there. The Koreans escaped, ran into Seoul Plaza Hotel, but the Chinese youngsters carrying long iron pipes came into the double door into the hotel and tried to catch and hit the Korean people by that. It was a serious news on the television, newspaper, and everywhere. And they were concerned about the security in the Seoul city by the Chinese youngsters. Another information that I got was that Chinese government established a business complex nearby Pyeongtaek US base that can hold more than 500,000 people. By gathering those 3 information, my concern is that with the external entity can mobilize Chinese citizens in South Korea for street demonstration or armed terrors against US base or Korean base, both. That's my serious concern. And I don't know how Korean government is concerned about it. I don't understand how much UN command or US command is aware of that. How serious are they taking it? Are they prepared for put down those kind of turmoil in case of conflict or crisis happening on the Korean Peninsula? I'd like to hear about your opinion. Thank you.
All right.
Sangju, I have press conference to attend to in like 20 minutes, so I have to run. So
Okay.
yeah, please understand. Anyway, thank you for the question. I think this question is more, I mean, I don't speak for the Korean government at the moment. I speak for the opposition party. So I do not know whether Korean government is aware of this or aware of that. And I cannot speak for the US command either. But having said that, China is giving us a very complicated, very serious challenges. In the past, China, while giving us economic opportunities and giving us the danger of economic dominance, and China was known to use economic influence, economic coercion, to try to influence neighboring countries' policies, especially in foreign and security areas. Something I feel very strongly about. So the Korea will have to prepare for that, and we hope that U.S. will stand with us when something like that happens. And the China's we have like Chinese students in Korea's universities numbering at tens of thousands. We have very sizable Chinese community and the Chinese community in my country, and in itself is a challenge. And the Korean government must approach these issues from a number of related angles, including law and order angle. And the information you shared with me and something you said about this should not happen, and Korean government should prepare for that and has to make best efforts to ascertain information. So Korean government is supposed to make sure that this doesn't happen. And I like to have my confidence in the capability of ROK government, the police force, law enforcement agencies, to make sure that this situation do not take place. But I hope that perhaps in the next forum, you can invite somebody from the Korean government, ask the same question, and you might be able to get more authoritative answers to your questions. Mr. Oh, thank you very much.
So thank you, Taeyong. We have just one more question quickly. Richard White, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Good.
go ahead, Richard.
Thank you very much. A question I had was, as you know, say, 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a lot of progress being made between the South Koreans and the United States on strengthening missile defenses in Korean Peninsula and beyond. That there seems to, though, have been a lost momentum in that area. So I wasn't sure if you had any suggestions about how we might restart that progress and address some of the new systems we're seeing coming out of North Korea.
Yes.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah.
As you know, the ROK government, one of ROK government's priority is to develop our own missile defense capabilities. And ROK government in the past has been strengthening cooperation with the United States in this very, very important area. And that is actually why the THAAD system was introduced to the ROK. And the current government of Korea actually have different ideas about the importance of THAAD, I think. And that's one of the concerns I have vis-a-vis the Moon Jae-in government. It is only natural that as North Korea's nuclear missile threat has increased, ROK and US will have to think about ways to strengthen missile defense capabilities, something that will have to happen. And I hope that the two militaries will address this issue as one of the priority issues.
Thank you very much, Taeyong. I really appreciate your time and engagement with our crews in Washington.
May I share
sure.
a couple of points?
Yes, go ahead.
I didn't have time to cover. One is among some experts in my country, there is a concern that the U.S. administration will make a small nuclear deal with North Korea, then might sacrifice the security needs of the ROK. And so I get this question all the time when I go to academic conferences in Seoul. Usually this question comes up. And my answer is that it's not very likely. That's my answer. Why? Because there are many substantive reasons, but very important political reason is there too. That is, if Biden administration is going for a small deal, a not very good small deal with North Korea, I'm sure that U.S. Congress, especially Republican members of U.S. Congress, will launch very, very strong oppositions to that. And that will become one of the political troubles for the Biden administration. Given that Biden administration have so many challenges domestic, like COVID-19 and the economy, immigration, climate change, and national harmony, I don't believe President Biden has an inclination to make another trouble with the Republican members of the Congress. So that's one political reason why that the danger of the small deal between US and the North Korea probably will not materialize. But I'd like to just share with you that there is a concern among Korean experts about this possibility, not just now, but for the last couple of years. One other issue is that it is about Anti-Leaflet Act. We now have a debate going on between the government party and opposition party that whether Anti-Leaflet Act is an important issue in the United States. Some government party members of the National Assembly have publicly stated in the Foreign Affairs Committee that actually Anti-Leaflet Act is not against the human rights. It is there to just protect the people living in the border area. So that point has been well explained and clearly understood by many opinion leaders in Washington, D.C. I doubt that. I talk to other people in Washington, D.C., and I have a very different sense about it. But I just wanted to let you know that this debate is going on in the National Assembly now. So I hope that in conclusion, I hope that with the coming of the Biden administration, I hope that there will be a chance for the ROK government and U.S. government to put their heads together to strengthen the commonalities in their policies and perceptions and strengthen their confidence in the months to come. Thank you, Sang-ju.
Thank you very much, Taeyong. And this is a great session. Let's give Congressman Cho a big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. We'll stay in touch with you. Okay, Taeyong?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, stay safe and warm. Okay, same here.
Have a healthy Lunar New Year's Day this week.
Will do. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.